Okay, so let's get into the tips. My first tip is talk the talk. Building and renovating is not something that most of us do regularly. It's something that for a lot of people is a once or a twice in a lifetime experience, and there's a whole lot of kind of stuff and jargon that we sometimes get a bit confused with. There's a couple of points that I wanted to talk about that are really quite important. The first one is prime cost. So PC, this is kind of a term that if you're starting to talk to builders, you'll start to hear this get thrown around. Prime costs, for those of you who can't read it, are allowances for the supply of goods or items where the final selection has not been made or whose final price is not known at the time the building contract is signed. The allowance is made for the cost of supply and delivery, which is included in the in the quote and contract price. For example, kitchen appliances, taps, bathroom, where all the stuff that you see here in the showroom is typical of what a PC might be. So it's the stuff that you actually like to go out and select. The important thing to know here is that they are allowances only and they're subject to change. Okay, so when you see a PC, it's not a quote. It's not that I can go out and buy anything I want because the builder's allowed $500 for a product. He's allowed $500, and that's it. Okay, so it is a very, here we go. So they're allowances only and they're subject to change. A provisional sum sounds very similar to a prime cost, and to be honest, I see a lot of the time these kind of all get mashed up together, and I've been guilty of it. Prime cost, provisional sum, PC, PS. However, there is a difference. Provisional sum allowances are for the supply of items and the relevant installation work. So that's the estimated cost price for the builder to do the work. So it's material plus labour. Okay, the example here I've said is structural steel and retaining walls. So there's some labour involved and there's some material involved. Similarly, they are allowances only and subject to change. So when you see a figure that's a provisional sum, it's an allowance that will buy you whatever $10,000 buys you, but it doesn't allow you to buy anything that you want just because it's listed that there's a retaining wall there. So that's an important distinction to understand. And part of the reason is because this next term, variation, probably the scariest term you'll hear when you're dealing with builders. If you understand how it all works, you can plan for it and iron out a lot of these things early in the process. A variation is quite simply a change in the cost of an item or particular task that is not included in the contract price. It may take the form of material and or labour costs, and under the terms of the building contract, the builder can claim a builder's margin of up to 20% on TP, top of the cost of the variation. Now the builder's margin, 20%, believe it or not, builders for the most part really don't want to charge you variations. It's just not a good way for them to wrap up a project. They would much prefer that their quoting is thorough and accurate in the first place, and they don't have to charge you a variation. The last thing they want to do is give you a whole bunch of variations, leave that sour taste in your mouth for you to go off and tell your friends that this builder just gave you a great big long list of variations. So what we're trying to get out of this tip is that you need to be careful of there being too many provisional sums in a quote, because that effectively means that there is a lot of uncertainty in the quote. Now, some items just have to be provided for as provisional sums, but others not so much. A provisional sum, when included in a quote with when the builder's put some time into it, is completely fine. A builder might contact a supplier and the relevant trade who's building that retaining wall, let's say, and so his provisional sum is based on a quote that he's got. It's an educated provisional sum. Unfortunately, there are other times when the provisional sum is a complete guess, and the builder puts in a figure that's $2,000 when really a figure that's closer should be $10,000. So what we need to try and do is eliminate as many of those provisional sums from the quote as possible. Now, sometimes that means going to an extra level of detail beyond what we would normally do, but those benefits in the longer term are significant. Tip number 2 is make your project the one the builder really wants to win. So builders are going to be quoting more than your project. If they're a good builder, they could be quoting quite a few projects at any one time. You want to make your project stand out from the crowd. Make it the project that they really want to win, the one that they put most of their time into, and the one that they feel most confident in quoting. So I'm saying you want your project to stand out from the crowd. You want to make your project easy to quote, which is about having professional drawings and thorough documentation. Your drawings should be thorough, accurate, and they should have appropriate detail. Appropriate detail meaning not drawings for the sake of drawings, which just scares the crap out of a builder, and there's a whole lot of detail there that's kind of not all that relevant. But there needs to be enough detail there so the client can understand what the expectation of the build is, and they can quote and build that accordingly. Important to remember here that we're playing the builder's game. It's a builder's game that we're playing here. These guys do this day in, day out, and for the most part, you as clients don't. So you're going to benefit from getting to know the rules. We need to work in a way that suits them, okay? There's no point going against the grain. We need to work with systems and process information that helps the process. Tip number 3, create an inclusion schedule. So what is an inclusion schedule? An inclusion schedule itemises the fittings and finishes that are going to be used to complete your project, including appliances, taps, tiles, etc. So for the most part, an inclusion schedule will be a list of provisional sums for some of those prime cost allowances that we mentioned before. The reason that you need an inclusion schedule is because there's a whole lot of things that are missing from your drawings. Joinery, kitchen, bathroom and ensuite joinery, kitchen appliances, electrical items, bathroom fittings, wardrobes, tiling and a lot more. Yes, they're indicated on a set of drawings, but seeing some grid lines on a floor plan indicating tiles doesn't tell the builder anything about how much those tiles are worth. And likewise with the kitchen joinery. A kitchen could be $10,000 or $15,000, it could be $60,000 or $70,000. So we need to make that distinction to make sure that we get accurate and comparable prices. Ultimately, we're creating transparency so that the builder and the client can come together with an understanding that we're all on the same page, which helps create a much better and easier relationship. One of the hats that I've just been kind of wearing over the last couple of years is my building quote hat. So this is a website that I created where you can get on and you can create your own inclusion schedule, and it does all of those things that I mentioned in terms of, so it takes you through the process to create a schedule that you use to issue to your builders with the drawings. So it's not, the drawings are still the control document, and this inclusion schedule, or what we call the prospects, is the supporting document to those drawings. It tells the builders all the things that they otherwise need to know, or at least 98% of them. There are always little things, but we've narrowed it to being a whole great big mess to a much smaller area of uncertainty. And through this we get quotes that are thorough, accurate and comprehensive. We also get quotes that are easy to compare. So when we go out to 2 or 3 builders, when we know that all of the builders have quoted on the same items, and in a new home there could be 150 items, all of those variables are a complete nightmare to try and keep track of if you haven't given an accurate scope and a consistent scope to the builders. Number 4 is shop smart. So no secret that builders buy a lot of stuff, so builders get a better price. And quite simply what we do is encourage clients to ask their builder if they pass on their trade price for PC items. PC items, again, it's the appliances, the bathroom fittings and the tiles. It's not the concrete that goes on the slab or the timber framing, it's the stuff that you go to a showroom and you buy. Again, the PC items. Now, that can add up to, in some projects, thousands of dollars. So get that. That's a nice, easy, neat little tip to save you some money. Also consider the benefits of bricks and mortar retailers versus buying online. This is not just about standing here in the Southern Innovations showroom, but there are benefits of dealing with real people real time when stuff goes wrong, and it does. It happened with us. We built our house, and the reassurance to walk into a showroom and to speak to a real person and say, this broke, can you replace it? Yes, I can, and we're done. Trying to do that online, speaking to someone in who knows where to get the product from who knows where else, you don't want to go there. There's enough that you've got to deal with in this process. Just don't go there. Australian standards is another one. So this is both safety issues for some products, as well as things like ratings for taps, AAA ratings, etc. Returns and warranties is pretty obvious, that the ease of bricks and mortar, someone who's local. Availability and delivery, rather than waiting for stuff to come in from all over the place. Product knowledge. Product knowledge is not just about knowledge of a product which you might feel you can do your own research on a website. It's about product knowledge in your local environment. How does that product perform in, whether it's climate related or in a certain situation, that you're just not going to get that level of advice when you're shopping online. So the real cost is all of these things. It's not just the dollar value. There's a lot more to it than that. And of course, bricks and mortar establishments, they're part of our community. They employ our people, and they support our sporting clubs and so on. So I urge you to get behind them where you possibly can. Final tip is don't ignore what's happening outside. So we spend all this time sitting down with our clients, talking about the floor plan, what's inside all these walls, and often that's at the expense of kind of forgetting what's happening around the outside, and there's potentially a lot of cost there that probably doesn't always get the attention it deserves. So things like garden taps, retaining walls, footpaths, driveways, paving, fencing, they all cost something. Now, ideally, we need these costs to be factored into a quote. We can't make these costs go away, but we can factor them in so that idea of blowing out a budget can be minimised, and you can prepare for it. You can budget for that. You can go to your bank with that amount of money needed, because you know that's what you need as a total building cost, rather than all the house and then a few bits and pieces missing. And of course, making that worse is that our total of nearly $14,500 may also attract the builder's margin of 20%. So there's another nearly $3,000 on top of that cost, which, as I said before, the builders don't want to charge you that. So try and get on top of that at an earlier stage and have a more comprehensive quote. I think we're done. Anyone have any questions? Excellent.